I was the orphan taken in by the Smith family. The elders of the Smiths arranged for Nate to marry me. I walked down the aisle with joy in my heart. He didn't object either. But after the wedding, Nate was distant. Never warm, never cruel. Eventually, he used business trips as an excuse to live apart from me for years. His mother, Susan, despised me for not giving the Smiths an heir. She mocked me at every turn. My entire life was spent waiting for Nate to love me and serving his family like a dutiful shadow. Drained and exhausted, I lay dying in a hospital bed. Nate, my husband, didn't bother to visit me one last time. Instead, it was Laura Miller who kindly stopped by. She smiled as she delivered the blow. "Nate's busy planning our wedding," she said. "He told me he'd marry me the moment you're gone. You've been Mrs. Smith for over 30 years, Sherry. Me and our kid, we've waited with no name, no title. You should be satisfied." Only then did I realize, Nate already had a family, a real one. He had love. He had a child. I was the only one left out in the cold. Then I opened my eyes and found myself back in time, still young, still living under the Smith's roof. Susan was teasing again. "Sherry, do you like Nate?" This time I answered silently in my heart. "No, I don't like him anymore. This time I'm going to do what I want." The scent of hospital disinfectant still lingered at the tip of my nose. The pain of illness still echoed in my bones. And there she was, Nate's mother, Susan, her voice sweet as ever. "Sherry, do you like Nate? How about marrying him after you graduate?" We were all gathered in the Smiths' living room. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, along with old friends of my late parents, smiled kindly at me. Susan was the picture of warmth and grace. Nothing like the sharp, punishing woman I knew from my past life. Back then, Nate and I were constantly apart, barely sharing a home, let alone a bed. No pregnancy. No child. Susan resented me for it. She concocted all kinds of strange herbal brews and made sure I drank every last drop, every single day. But that was the easy part. It was the daily barbed comments, the subtle humiliations that wore me down. The endless demands to serve her. Tea, massages, tending to her whims like a maid, not a daughter-in-law. And if I ever dared show resistance, she'd burst into tears. She'd wail about how hard it was raising an orphan like me. She'd remind everyone that she held me through nightmares when I was little, nursed me through every childhood fever. And that was my weakness. That's why I never fought back. "Sherry, don't be shy, sweetie. Say something." Susan nudged me gently. I blinked, returning to the present, and met her gaze, eyes full of feigned eagerness. Had I been more observant in my last life, I might have seen it for what it was. Not a mother's love, but urgency. The urgency of securing a marriage so they could lay claim to what was mine. At the time, I was just a spoiled, sheltered girl. Fresh from the trauma of losing both parents. Desperate for warmth and a place to belong. I thought I had found it in the Smiths. But that was before I lived through over 30 years of a hollow marriage. Before I endured Susan's cruelty without her mask. Now I saw everything clearly. So I stood up, offered a polite smile, and said, "Oh, Aunt Susan, I think you misunderstood. I've only ever seen Nate as an older brother. And after high school, I plan on going to college." Susan's face turned ghostly pale. This moment, this performance in front of guests, was meant to seal my engagement to Nate. To make their claim to my inheritance appear righteous, unquestionable. But Susan was quick. She rose with practiced poise, threw an arm around my shoulders, and laughed lightly to the room. "This girl always so shy. Nate, why don't you take Sherry for a walk in the garden?" Nate sat quietly on the opposite couch. Teenage Nate, young, handsome, and already a little aloof. Our parents had been close friends. He and I had grown up together, technically childhood sweethearts. I used to follow him around, beg him to play with me. Back then we got along. But as we grew older, Nate began to pull away. In my previous life, I chalked it up to his reserved nature. What I didn't want to admit was that he simply didn't like me. I was a pampered, temperamental girl. And he was the obedient son, trapped by his parents' expectations. He didn't love me. He couldn't walk away from me. Of course he resented me. But instead of breaking it off, he married me. Then stood by while his mother made my life hell. Then turned around and showered his love on Laura. I hated him. But more than that, I hated myself. For being blind. For letting love ruin me. I clenched my fists, then slowly released them. I gently peeled myself out of Susan's embrace, still smiling. "No need, Nate. Don't you have plans to meet Miss Laura today? If you like her, you should bring her home sooner rather than later. Aunt Susan should meet her. A murmur rippled through the room. Someone chuckled. So Nate already has someone? And here his mom is busy matchmaking. For the first time since my return, I looked Nate directly in the eye. His face had gone even paler than Susan's. The corners of his eyes were tinged red. I didn't care to linger. I offered a quick nod to the room and walked out. I stepped out of the living room and made my way straight to the front yard mailbox. Sorting through the usual stack of envelopes, I finally found one addressed to me. Sherry. Nate's voice rang out behind me. I spun around quickly, hiding the letter behind my back. What are you throwing a fit about now? I frowned. What do you mean? You confessed to me yesterday and now you're saying you see me as family? Can you stop flipping your feelings every 5 minutes? My mom treats you like a daughter, and you just humiliated her in front of everyone. I stared at him in silence, memories from my past life swirling back. Back then, Susan would regularly humiliate me in public after we married. I once made the mistake of confiding in Nate, only for him to lash out. My mom's not good enough to you? You can't handle a few words from her. So now I gave his line right back. Susan treats me like a daughter, and a daughter can't speak a few truths without her falling apart? He said nothing. Just sighed. You're acting weird. Like you're a completely different person. Of course I was. In his eyes, something was definitely off. After all, in my previous life, once my parents were gone, I clung to the Smiths like they were my salvation. I shed all my pride, swallowed every ounce of anger. I didn't even dare argue with Susan. And I tried so hard to win Nate's approval even when it hurt. I scoffed. So what are you mad about now? Didn't you always hate me following you around? Now that I said I don't like you anymore, isn't that exactly what you wanted? I turned to leave. There was still a letter I needed to read. But Nate said, I never. It doesn't matter whether you said it or not. What I thought was, none of it matters anymore, Nate. Whether you ever loved me or not, it means nothing now. He frowned, clearly irritated. So I can't even say something nice? Sherry, you're still impossible to deal with. After my parents died, I had no one to rely on. And Nate's attitude changed with the wind. He used to speak gently to me. Now he didn't even bother to hide the contempt. Impossible to deal with? Because I wasn't going along with his plan anymore? The so-called nice things he wanted to say, they were just to smooth things over. To lull me into agreeing to an engagement. In my past life, once we got engaged, he immediately came to me with a pitch. The company was expanding, he needed funds, it was a great investment. I handed over most of my inheritance. It was the beginning of the private enterprise boom. Opportunities were everywhere. And with my money behind him, Nate scooped up real estate, food distribution contracts, and built a business empire across San Francisco. People admired me, envied me as the wife of a tycoon. What they never knew was that without me he wouldn't have had a chance in hell. But this time I'll stand at the top. And watch the Smith family's little circus unravel itself into ruin. I shrugged, flashing a sharp smile. Sure, I'm impossible to deal with. So what? Suck it up. Back inside, I rushed to open the letter. There was one person I had all but forgotten. My Uncle Mike. He was my mother's half-brother and lived in the UK. I'd only met him once. He came to us years ago, desperate for help with his mother's illness. My parents had supported him, financially and emotionally. They even got him into a good hospital. We stayed in touch for a while. But over the years, contact faded. What I hadn't known in my previous life was that Uncle Mike had made it big overseas, quite by accident. By the time he found out about my parents' fatal accident, a year had already passed. He tracked me down, learned I was taken in by the Smiths, and began writing. The letter had been sent to my old home, eventually redirected to the Smiths' mailbox. Susan had seen it, seen all of them. She just chose to say nothing. Years later, I discovered the truth. Uncle Mike had been sending letters and money to me all along. But by then it was far too late. I finished reading. He explained he couldn't return to the country for complicated reasons, but he wanted to reach me. This was his 10th letter, he said, repeating much of what he had written before. Telling me about his life in the UK, expressing worry, offering comfort. And this time he asked, would I be willing to come live with him? Inside the envelope were 10 large denomination bills. And a plane ticket to the UK. My eyes stung. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like an orphan. I had family. Someone out there still cared. The flight departed from New York, 4 days from now. I took a deep breath and straightened up. There was still work to be done. First, manage the inheritance my parents left behind. The properties were in good neighborhoods, worth holding on to. Their value would only rise. The cash? I'd split it. Half to bring abroad, half to stay in a secure bank. And as for Uncle Mike, I didn't know him well enough to blindly trust. So I'd keep my distance at first. Watch. And make sure it was safe before I stepped into his world. Thankfully, I had just graduated high school. It gave me the perfect excuse to leave the house under the pretense of meeting friends. Handling my own business was suddenly much easier. At the bank, I ran into a few classmates. They lit up when they saw me. I was just about to look for you. Come on, it's a class hangout. When I arrived at the venue, Nate was already there. Someone joked. What, no Sherry trailing behind today? Yeah, where's your little wifey? Nate spun a lighter between his fingers, smirking. She's such a pain. I'm enjoying the peace without her. And for the record, I don't like Sherry. Laughter exploded across the room. Oh, so who do you like? Don't tell me it's our class belle, Laura? They hooted and pushed Laura toward him, egging him on. The girl next to me coughed awkwardly. Only then did the others notice me, lit faintly by the flashing party lights. I stepped forward without flinching. Don't let me interrupt. Carry on. Nate instinctively shielded Laura behind him. Sherry, what game are you playing now? I sneered. God, how I wanted to stab both of them in the heart. But nothing had happened yet. Not in this life. If I told them what they'd done to me in the last one, how they ruined me, who would believe it? So I smiled. Nate, if you hated me so much, why didn't you say it sooner? How spineless are you? Then I clapped my hands. Well, guess I'm not welcome here. I'll leave. Before anyone could react, I had already turned and pushed the door open. Nate scrambled after me. Sherry, wait, I didn't mean. A voice behind us shrieked, oh my God. Laura fainted. Nate immediately ditched me. Sherry, that was just me blowing off steam. I'll explain everything later. He was gone before he even finished his sentence, rushing back to Laura. I stood still, watching with cold clarity. Then I turned and walked away. There would be no later. 3 more days and I'd be on a plane to the UK. After that, we'd never see each other again. The next morning I packed. Tossed what didn't matter. Susan wandered in, making casual conversation. She tried to fish for where I'd applied to college. Of course, I didn't tell her I was planning to study abroad. I mentioned some random local university. She smiled and praised the choice. Then quickly steered the conversation back to Nate. You two could get engaged first. That way it won't interfere with college. I hadn't even opened my mouth to shut it down before she added. I already talked to Nate. He said he and that Laura girl are just classmates. You don't have to worry. Still clinging to her little scheme. I stepped back a little. Aunt Susan, I really have no interest in Nate. But she didn't believe me. He pressed on eagerly. You're such a sweet girl. I'll make sure Nate cuts ties with that Laura girl completely. Unfortunately, Nate walked in just in time to hear that. He didn't understand the context. He stormed over to me, eyes full of disappointment and disgust. Sherry, does everything always have to revolve around you? Laura's got health problems, her family's struggling. I was just helping her out. You had to go make a scene and tattle to my mom. He practically exploded. He yanked the necklace from around his neck, the one he had planned to give me. Crystal beads scattered across the floor. I was going to give you this as an apology, but clearly that's a waste of time. Let me spell it out, Laura and I are nothing. But I'm not going to stop seeing her because of you. Then, as if to punctuate his tantrum, he kicked over the trash bin near the door. Stuff spilled out, bits and pieces from my room. Toys. Trinkets. Little things he had once given me. Nate's face twisted. His eyes went red. You threw all of this away? Yes, I said simply. I don't like them anymore. So I tossed them. I nudged a stray crystal bead with my toe. 2 more days until my flight. San Francisco to New York wasn't far. But I'd need to get there early. I didn't have much to bring. Valuable jewelry and financial documents were already secured in the bank's safe deposit box. Nate's parents had gone out of town on business. It spared me from having to say goodbye face to face. They had raised me for years, yes. But it had always been about the inheritance. Even the money my Uncle Mike had sent over the years, Susan had pocketed it all. Used it to fund the bare minimum of my upkeep. When I rolled my small suitcase into the entry hall, I ran into Nate and Laura. They'd just come back from somewhere. Nate immediately noticed the suitcase. "Where are you going? Gonna run to my mom again and cry?" I gave a light shrug. "No interest in that. I'm going to stay with a classmate for a couple days. Susan knows." Which wasn't a lie. I had told Susan I'd be at a friend's place for a few nights. Nate grumbled, still sulking. "Fine. Just don't expect me to come pick you up." "Didn't plan on it." Laura suddenly spoke up, eyes wide with practiced innocence. "Sherry, I just got kicked out of my house. I had nowhere to go. Nate was just being kind. Susan told me you were upset about me and I'm really sorry." "You don't need to apologize to her." Nate grabbed her wrist. "If she hadn't made such a fuss, my mom wouldn't have even gotten involved." Perfect match, those two. I no longer found it amusing. I started walking. Behind me, Laura's voice wavered with soft desperation. "Nate, maybe you should go talk to Sherry? Forget it. Let her go. She's got nowhere else to be, she'll come crawling back." Nate said it with such certainty. With such cold, sneering confidence. I paused for half a second. Then kept walking. So that was it. They bullied me because they believed I had no way out. That was fine. The next time we met, I'd be the one watching them. Learn what it really feels like. To have nowhere to go. The first day I left, Nate didn't think much of it. By the second, he was agitated enough to ask the housekeeper. "Sherry's still not back?" She shook her head. His handsome brows furrowed sharply. He let out a bitter laugh. "Unbelievable. If she likes being out so much, let her stay gone forever." Spitting the words like poison, he still circled back. "Did she say which friend's house she was going to?" The housekeeper shook her head again. A tight knot clenched in Nate's chest, heavy and suffocating. Passing by Sherry's room, something caught his eye. A soft glint of light beside the large potted plant near the door. He bent down. A single crystal bead. He froze, then crouched almost instinctively to search for more. Regret bubbled up. Why had he yanked the necklace apart? It was supposed to be her graduation gift. He always loved sparkly things. He knew that. He'd always known that. Sherry had a temper, sure. But after losing her parents, she'd softened so much. He knew that too. So why? Why had he pushed her like that? He thought maybe when she got back he'd just apologize. Really apologize. But one day passed. Then another. And then a third. Still no sign of her. His unease reached a breaking point. He began calling her closest classmates. Each one gave the same response. They hadn't seen Sherry. He refused to believe it. Drove to their houses himself. Knocked on every door. Nothing. Finally, he opened her bedroom door. The cozy room where she once lived felt hollow. The stuffed animals he'd given her? Gone. Her clothes. Her shoes. Empty. The room had been stripped clean of her. Panic swelled in his chest. He searched desperately for something, anything, that proved she had still been here. All he found was a folded note, tucked beneath a book on her desk. "I'm gone. Don't look for me." No sign off. No punctuation. Not a single mark that belonged to him. The plane touched down in the UK. But I didn't call Uncle Mike right away. Instead, I hired a private investigator. Just basic background. Was his household stable? Were the people around him kind? I didn't want to barge into a home already hanging by a thread. Fortunately, the report was reassuring. Uncle Mike owned a sizable farm in the countryside. He had a solid reputation. A simple family. Peaceful, close-knit. Still, I'd braced myself for the worst. If Mike proved unreliable, I was prepared to put myself through school on my own. I'd survived worse. Once I had the information I needed, I bought some gifts and finally reached out. When he heard I'd arrived, he came to pick me up immediately. 3 days later, I set foot on his farm. Uncle Mike was over 10 years older than my mom, and years of chasing opportunity under the sun had weathered his features. He wasn't much of a talker. When he saw me, all he said was, "You look just like your mother." Then he handed me a credit card. "Use it however you want." He showed me the horses. Let me play rough with his massive dog. Aunt Annie, his wife, was warm and soft around the edges. Her baking was heavenly. She showered me with affection, always pulling new dessert ideas out of thin air. Mike's son was already married. His wife was Mexican, which meant I got to eat real tacos that didn't taste like cardboard. His daughter Julia was just a year older than me. When she saw my modest, conservative outfits, she shrieked, "Oh no, sweetie. Don't let tragic fashion ruin that killer body." She dragged me into town, and we went on an all-out shopping spree. Thanks to her, I blended into the local crowd almost immediately. Once summer ended, it was time for college. With Uncle Mike's connections, I got into Julia's university. Same campus, different path. I chose finance. Not by accident. Not for lack of passion. But because, after everything I'd lived through, and with the resources I had now, I knew exactly the kind of empire I was going to build. Life in the UK turned out to be warmer than I had imagined. During holidays, I'd run wild on the farm, helping with odd chores, laughing until my stomach hurt. At school, I studied and worked on assignments alongside classmates from all over the world. In my sophomore year, after thorough research and planning, I decided to try my hand at a small import-export business. I spoke with Uncle Mike about it. He didn't shoot it down. Instead, he asked, "Do you have enough funding? Need me to introduce you to a few contacts?" Having a mentor would definitely smooth the path. But honestly, a few bumps in the road wouldn't kill me. I was young. I had money. I had time. And most importantly, I had the freedom to make mistakes. So I partnered with 3 classmates and we pooled our investments to start a small company. We exported British clothing and food products to neighboring countries. By junior year, the company had made a modest profit. But my teammates, they had other ideas. Some wanted to branch off on their own. Others feared the business wasn't stable and bailed. So I made the call and dissolved the company. That experience, it was worth more than the money. Because I learned the real profits weren't in trading goods. They were in owning the supply chain. If I controlled production, I'd control margins. So I started planning again. New strategy, fresh research. My goal, launch another company before graduation. With the money I'd earned, I bought Uncle Mike a car. And for myself, I bought a cozy apartment near campus, which I shared with Julia. I filled it with stray cats. Some healthy, some with missing limbs or clouded eyes. Didn't matter. I took them all in. When the sunlight spilled onto our little balcony, they'd curl up at my feet, soft and sleepy. I'd pet one, tease another, and sometimes, just sometimes, I'd catch a ghost of the past. I'd loved cats even back then. It had taken weeks of convincing before Nate finally got me a kitten. But the moment I brought it home, Susan had wrinkled her nose. "Cats aren't good for pregnant women. You can't even get pregnant and now you bring this thing into the house?" The kitten hadn't done anything wrong. It just trembled in my arms, sensing it didn't belong. In the end, I had to give it away. To a classmate who loved cats like I did. I provided everything: food, toys, vet bills. And I visited when I could. That memory floated past as I lifted a long-haired kitten into my arms. It struck me then, I hadn't thought about my past life in a while. Hadn't thought about Nate. Or his entire rotten family. Guys, here and now. I was happy. Too happy to look back on the filth I'd left behind. In the second half of my junior year, I launched my new business. Dairy. From breeding the cows to processing the final product. I planned to build the supply chain from the ground up. By the time I graduated, the full production system was in place. It meant I could slash overhead. Negotiate from a position of strength, whether I was dealing with UK buyers or overseas clients. Once everything was stable, I decided it was time to visit the US again. Uncle Mike didn't try to stop me. Julia came along. The moment we landed, my blonde-haired, blue-eyed business partner Anderson was already waiting at the gate with a bouquet of roses. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine, clean-cut, polished, and annoyingly smug. "Sherry," he beamed. Surprised. I gave him a flat look. "I thought you were supposed to be negotiating a land deal. Who's handling it now?" He blinked those bright ocean eyes at me. "So I'm less important than a piece of property." "Got it. Obviously." "Stop pouting." Julia burst out laughing beside me. "He's as handsome as your bodyguard." Then she gave Anderson a sneaky thumbs up. "Go get her." With newfound encouragement, Anderson ran forward, eager to grab my suitcase. But he didn't get the chance. Another figure had already stepped in. Tall, broad-shouldered. He lifted the suitcase handle without a word. and like a scene from a movie, opened an umbrella over our heads. His forearms stretched across my field of vision. Toned muscle, sun-burnished skin, veins just barely visible. "The car's ready, boss," he said. Cool voice, but the tone was gentle. I looked up and met a pair of jet black eyes. Black hair. Expression unreadable. Anderson. It was like he didn't exist. Immature, I thought, sliding into the car with a silent sigh. The first thing I did after returning to the U.S. was visit my parents' graves. When I arrived, a wilted bouquet of white chrysanthemums lay at the foot of their headstone, trembling in the wind. Likely left by one of their old friends. I gently moved the flowers aside and placed my own fresh arrangement. Then I sat down and told them everything. I told them about life in the UK. About Uncle Mike and how he looked after me. About Aunt Annie's incredible baking. And their comically inconsistent attempts at grandparenting. When I talked about myself, it was all good things. I told them I had family now, real family, to lean on, to laugh with. I told them I graduated with honors, made friends who shared my ambitions, started a business that I could be proud of. "You don't have to worry," I whispered, brushing rain from their names carved in stone. "I've taken good care of myself." Raindrops fell from the sky and slid across my lips, salty and cold. As we walked out of the cemetery, Anderson held an umbrella over Julia. Daniel stayed beside me, quiet and steady. That's when we passed a man and a woman coming from the opposite direction. The man held a fresh bouquet of white chrysanthemums. The woman chased after him under a flimsy umbrella, voice shrill with frustration. "You come here every day and you still won't find Sherry. I'm pregnant, Nate. Why can't you think about me for once?" The voice, it was both familiar and foreign. Instinctively I turned. Of course. Nate and Laura. Julia, Anderson, and the others glanced toward me, catching the mention of my name. I shook my head, signaling them to let it go. Laura kept nagging, her voice cutting through the damp air. Then Nate abruptly stopped. He spun around, yanked her umbrella from her hand and threw it aside. "Can you just shut up for one goddamn minute? You're driving me insane." Laura shrieked and nearly stumbled. And right there in front of my parents' grave, they were about to break into a full-blown fight. I quickly asked the cemetery attendant to intervene. As for why I didn't step forward, why I didn't confront him, because I didn't come back for Nate. I came back because I was interested in local real estate trends. I came back for business. And in business, you don't waste time on irrelevant people. Unfortunately, bad timing caught up with me. While visiting my old family home, I ran into an old family friend. Someone who had ties to both my parents and the Smiths. It didn't take long before he picked up his phone and called Susan. She was emotional, her voice trembling with excitement. "Why didn't you tell me you were back, sweetheart? I've been so worried about you. Where are you? I'll come get you." "No need, Aunt Susan. I've got things to do. Gotta go." I hung up before she could say another word, and handed the phone back to the man. By the time the Smiths arrived, my group had already checked into a hotel in the city. That night we were attending a formal gala. An opportunity to connect with developers and potential partners in San Francisco. The event was lavish, almost over the top. But our team navigated it effortlessly. During the dinner I chatted with several major players. Some remembered my parents and had kind things to say. Others respected my business acumen and confidence. Between legacy and merit I held both cards. And the deals began to fall into place. But midway through the evening there was a commotion at the entrance. Mr. Phipps, the host, frowned. "What's going on?" "A Mr. Smith insists on coming in," said one of the staff. "He doesn't have an invitation." Phipps turned to me, offering a polite smile. He knew I had once been raised by the Smiths. "Looks like our team forgot to send Mr. Smith an invite. No matter, let's welcome him in." I kept my expression neutral, though I could have laughed. Forgot to invite him? Hardly. The truth was no one respected the Smiths anymore. Without my financial support, their small company had started to crumble. Policy changes, economic downturns, they couldn't keep up. They were nearing bankruptcy. No one with any weight in the industry wanted to associate with them. But I didn't object to letting them in. Most people didn't know the full extent of our history. And I wasn't about to let anyone accuse me of being ungrateful. Outwardly I'd keep things civil. Nate's eyes locked on me the moment he stepped into the ballroom. He was wearing a tailored suit. Well, it had been tailored years ago. Now it looked worn and slightly rumpled from the scuffle at the entrance. He didn't bother to fix it. Instead he strode straight toward me. "Sherry." His voice cracked with something that sounded like hope. "You're finally back." His eyes, once so lifeless, now shimmered like they'd caught a spark. But I didn't move. Before he could reach me, 3 people stepped forward in unison. Julia and Anderson blocked his path, both frowning. "Who are you?" Julia asked. Nate's eyes reddened instantly. "Sherry, why?" I had no interest in nostalgia. "It's been a long time. I have business to attend to. Maybe we'll catch up some other time." Behind him, Susan barreled in, using age and self-righteousness like a shield. She squeezed forward, tears already streaming. "Sherry, child, how could you leave without a word back then? Where have you been all these years?" She grabbed my arm, clinging like a drowning woman. I slowly peeled her off me. "Susan, Uncle Mike sent letters. You got them. Why didn't you ever tell me? And for the record, I left a note. That did it. The people around us weren't stupid. A few lines were all it took to piece things together. Susan had hidden my uncle's letters. Because she didn't want me to find my real family. Not out of love. But out of greed, for the inheritance tied to my name." Susan's tears vanished in an instant. She laughed awkwardly. "Oh Sherry, don't be mad. I didn't know if the man was legit or if it was some kind of scam. But Nate looked everywhere for you. You two should talk." She physically dragged Nate to my side. He didn't speak. Just stared at me, eyes bloodshot like I was air and he hadn't breathed in years. His gaze made my skin crawl. Daniel stepped forward, voice calm but firm. "Miss Sherry doesn't like people standing too close." Anderson positioned himself on the other side. "I mean, I'm this good-looking and even I couldn't win her over." "Give it up, buddy." Nate ignored them both. Still staring. Still hoping. "Why did you leave?" he asked. "Do you have any idea how long I looked for you?" I shook my head. "I don't. And I don't want to." Nate faltered. Then reached into his pocket and pulled out a familiar object. A crystal necklace. "I fixed it. The day I came looking for you, I was going to apologize. Sherry, I swear I won't mess things up again." His voice trembled with sincerity. Eyes glossy with tears. Anderson glanced at the necklace and smirked. "You're kidding me. That cheap trinket's supposed to win her back." Nate looked at me, eyes desperate. "Whatever you want, I'll get it. Just please don't shut me out." But it had never been about the price. In the past, even the stuffed animals Nate gave me on a whim made me happy. Because I loved him. Not the gift. No. I didn't even have the energy to hate him. He was weak. Pathetic. And without the fog of love clouding my judgment, I saw him clearly for the first time. He wasn't even worth calling an opponent. "I used to admire your arrogance," I said with a smile. "The way you thought you had me in the palm of your hand, it was almost cute." "Those were just angry words," he said quickly. I thought. "Oh, it doesn't matter." I took a glass of champagne from a passing server and said coolly, "Does Laura know you're here, by the way?" He didn't respond. "Don't waste my time. I'm here for business, not drama." "Okay." Nate looked shattered. Back then, if I had so much as asked him for one more word, he'd have told me not to bother him. He was busy. Busy loving Laura. Busy making babies. Busy living happily ever after. Now the roles had reversed. As I turned to leave, Nate panicked. "Don't go. Please. Can't we start over?" But this time I didn't have to answer. Julia tossed her champagne in his face. "You have a wife and a baby on the way and you're still chasing Sherry? You disgusting pig." Nate paled. All color drained from his face. "I didn't mean to hide the marriage," he said quickly. "Sherry, please, I just want to make things right. Don't be mad. Laura drugged me. That's how it happened. All these years I've stayed faithful to you." I almost laughed out loud. Anger? He thought I was angry? He didn't even warrant my irritation. In the end, Mr. Phipps personally had the Smiths escorted out. But Nate wasn't done. He waited outside, hoping for one last glance at me. Instead, Laura showed up, belly round with pregnancy, and began beating him in public. "I'm carrying your child and you're still hung up on another woman? You bastard." Hormonal, emotional, and loud. Nate didn't comfort her. He snapped. Told her to shut up and go home. They ended up physically fighting in front of the valet. And then Susan shoved Laura. Blood trickled down her leg in thin, terrible streams. I looked away. Got into the car. Nate chased us, calling my name over and over. Wow, Julia muttered, disgusted. He really thinks he's some tragic lover. I corrected her. He's not in love with me. He's in love with the idea of using the past to manipulate me. So I'll help save the Smith family. I stared out the window. Nate only loves one person. And it's always been himself. The business deal went better than expected. I signed on with Mr. Phipps and a few other investors to co-develop what would soon become the largest shopping complex in San Francisco. With the planning phase underway, I'd be staying in the US a while longer. Anderson returned to the UK first. Before boarding his flight, he pulled me aside like a panicked older brother. Promise me one thing, he said. Don't get back with that guy. And Daniel, he's no good either. The guy probably can't even afford a watch on his salary. I mean, look at those muscles, he screams, bouncer, not boyfriend. Daniel walked up silently. I actually own a boxing gym, he said, calm as ever. Profitable one. If you'd like to know more, boss, I'd be happy to give you the full breakdown. I shot both of them a glare. I buy my own things. And for the record, if any of you get in the way of my money, you're both fired. Anderson huffed all the way onto the plane, muttering. Daniel quietly tugged his sleeves down, trying to hide the muscles stretching his shirt. Not that it helped. With his wide shoulders and tight frame, there was no hiding much. Nate tried to contact me a few times. Eventually he stopped. He had enough disasters of his own to handle. After Laura's miscarriage, her parents descended on him like wolves. They demanded compensation. The Smith company, already gasping for air, collapsed under the pressure. Bankruptcy followed. Laura's family brought in an excellent legal team. The divorce was brutal. Laura walked away with most of the Smith family's remaining assets. Nate's father couldn't take the disgrace. He vanished. No one knew where he'd gone. Susan, spiraling from the shock, lost her mind. She wandered the streets, ranting at people who didn't exist. She screamed at invisible daughters-in-law. One day she threw herself into traffic. She survived, but barely. Now she lay paralyzed, confined to a hospital bed. Nate, desperate, begged Laura for money. But most of it had long since been handed off to her greedy relatives. Laura, bitter and exhausted, refused to help. Their arguments escalated. Nate blamed her for everything. And during one fight he shoved her right down a flight of stairs. She survived, but barely. He was arrested within the hour. I, being the kind person I am, went to visit Susan in the hospital. I even paid her medical bills. People called me an angel. What they didn't know was this. I hired the worst caretaker money could buy. The kind that mixed up meds and scrolled through their phone while patients cried. I stood beside Susan's bed and smiled down at her. Aunt Susan, I said softly, you remember everything now, don't you? When you were hurting me, did it ever cross your mind you'd end up like this? You knew Nate was cheating, but you still blamed me for being infertile. You made me drink those herbal poisons. Made me kneel for hours. All while you played grandma to Laura's baby. Her eyes bulged with fury. Her fingers twitched helplessly in her lap. She couldn't touch me. Couldn't speak. She just drooled, wide-eyed and filled with rage. I wouldn't let her die. No, that would be too easy. She'd live, trapped in that body, watching the world leave her behind. Before Nate's sentencing, he begged to see me. I agreed. He cried the moment he saw me. He told me he was remembering things. Memories that weren't his. He saw how cold he had been to me. How I had lived a life of sorrow because of him. Can you forgive me? He asked. I think I loved you. But I didn't know how to admit it. My whole life I did what my parents wanted. And when they told me to love you, I panicked. So I did the opposite. How stupid is that? I lost everything. He sobbed. Broken. I shook my head. And then he smiled. Well, I guess this is karma. You hate me and now I'm paying the price. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Karma. I echoed. Oh no, sweetheart. Karma doesn't work this neatly. He blinked. I leaned closer. Did you think your company's collapse was just bad luck? That Laura just happened to find the address for the gala that night? That her miscarriage was a tragic accident? That her poor parents magically found one of the best law firms in the state? Nate went pale. His face drained of every drop of color. But his eyes, his bloodshot, desperate eyes, stayed locked on me. You hate me that much? he whispered. Why shouldn't I? In my last life I never hurt a soul. And yet I lived in hell. Because the Smith family wanted my money. They ruined me. And in this life, I'd barely lifted a finger. Every fall they took, they walked right into it themselves. I stood up and looked him in the eyes one last time. I'll let your mother know you're being sentenced. Then I walked out. The black car was waiting. Rain streaked down the windows as we pulled into the newly zoned business district. Steel frames rose in the fog, reaching toward the sky. The future was already taking shape. And this time, it belonged to me.